The other thing I wanted to share was a little bit more fun. There's a TikTok video going around, and this one I know came from Christ, in one of our moderators in chat. I'm going to play it because it's a fun TikTok video, because it's funny to me. I don't know if it'll be funny to everyone. Here it is. Let's listen. Now, I believe she is an advisor to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm kidding. She's not, but she could be.
Hey, so you know what I don't fucking understand? This is what I don't understand. See this? See this? See that? This. This is worth $50? This is worth $5? This is the exact same piece of fucking plastic. This is the same thing. We made up these arbitrary numbers. And then we said, we can't print more or else it'll be worthless. How about just don't let it be worthless? How about just don't tell anybody or just like don't let it happen? We literally made this up. This is a construct we made up. Just don't let it inflate. Just don't. Like people, I get inflate, but I don't. Like just don't let it, fuck. You let this happen. You let this happen. How about you just let everything else happen too? Why don't you just let stuff not inflate? Like just deflate it.
So some truly awesome economic analysis there. The reason I want to bring it up is there is a grain of truth in what she's saying, and there's a clear misunderstanding what she's saying. And I know it sounds silly, and a lot of people who already understand economics are going to look at this and go, why is this even worth talking about? But I actually think there's a lot of like economic illiteracy out there. And so I want to throw this out here. First of all, she is right in the sense that because she's holding fiat currency in her hand, there's no intrinsic value to that fiat currency. The value of that currency is merely a social construct, to use a postmodern term. It's merely an agreement. It's a communal agreement about the value of what that currency is, in this case, dollars. So she's right in that there's just a social agreement on that currency. Now, that's not the problem that she's pointing out so much. But that is actually a big problem because it means that because there's no intrinsic value to that currency, it's very fragile to perception. So if, for example, if you're talking about US currency, if, for example, the rest of the world doesn't trust that the US currency is valuable anymore, then suddenly it's not valuable. It makes it very fragile. And the more reckless the US is with printing their money, and making bad financial decisions, the more likely it is that the rest of the world will cease valuing U.S. currency. That wouldn't be true if it was backed by something real. I think I don't know, maybe she has Canadian dollars. I don't know what country those dollars are. But it wouldn't be true if it was backed by gold, for example, or something valuable, right? Because in that case, well, you could always redeem it for the valuable thing, so there's a floor. It can't actually go below that. So she's right in the sense that it's just fiat currency. It's inherently worthless. There is no inherent difference between those two dollars. That's true. That is true. Here's where she totally misses the point. Inflation. So I'm going to use the word inflation carefully here. She's using the word inflation to mean price inflation. Inflation didn't used to mean price inflation. It used to just mean inflation of the monetary supply. And then you would have to talk about price inflation separately. I think it's worth teasing those two things out. Nowadays, if you look up at a modern dictionary, inflation actually has been coerced as a term to just mean price inflation. I'm going to separate it out. I don't want to use the same term for both. So she's talking about price inflation. And what she's saying is, well, price inflation also is some sort of just communal agreement. So why don't we just not have price inflation? Why don't we just deflate? If we can arbitrarily decide that these two bills are different, why can't we arbitrarily decide that we don't have inflation when we print, or we just don't tell people that we print or whatever? And the reason for that is price inflation is not a function of communal agreement on the value of currency. It's a function of how much stuff there is, like actual physical stuff. Currency has no, especially fiat currency, the fiat currency's value is only represented by what stuff you can get with it. And in the real world, not in the government world of printing presses, but in the real world, there's a limited supply of things. So if you want a new Tesla, there's a limited supply of Teslas. Now, yes, Elon Musk could ramp up the production of Teslas and blah, 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 blah. But even if he did that massively, it wouldn't happen overnight. So in the short term, there would be a limited supply. And eventually he's going to run out of engineers who can do it and scale problems and blah, blah, blah. So like even in that case, there's a limit. But if you want certain things, there's a limit to those things. And if money gets printed, you don't have to tell anyone that there's more money in the system. You don't have to tell anyone for price inflation to happen. Price inflation happens naturally without the consent of anyone by printing more money. It's a mathematical byproduct of printing more money. Because what happens is you have the same amount of stuff. When you print money, you don't print more Teslas, you don't print more bread, you don't print more iPads, you don't print more doctors. You're just printing currency. You don't print more stuff. So there's the same amount of stuff in the world. And human desire to obtain that stuff is infinite, right? There's no, as anyone who's ever started out with not much money and started to make money has noticed in themselves, I'm sure, the desire is infinite, right? Even if it's not for things, you might be like, well, now I want nicer. The few things I have, I want them to be nicer. Or I want to take vacations more. I want to spend more money on this. The desire is infinite. So the amount of stuff doesn't change just because the government prints more money. That stuff stays constant. So if you don't tell anyone about it, as she's suggesting, and you just pretend that you didn't inflate your currency, the price rise happens anyway. Because let's say we could all go under a mass delusion and say, okay, our currency is massively inflated, but we're going to pretend that it's not. We're going to keep all the prices. You couldn't do this, but let's say you could. We're all going to agree. We're going to keep the prices the same. Well, what would happen? We would instantaneously run out of everything. Because if, in fact, when you take, let's just take Teslas, because I brought that example up before. If, in fact, you take the total number of Teslas that there are, and you divide it by the total number of dollars available to spend on Teslas, right? You get a certain, all right, let's flip that. Sorry, total number of dollars is available divided by Teslas. You get a certain dollar amount per Tesla, right? And if you suddenly increase those dollars, but you're not going to increase the price of the Tesla, you'll just run out of Teslas because there's not more dollars to be spent on Teslas, but there aren't more Teslas, so you run out of Teslas. And that doesn't happen just with Teslas. It happens with doctors. It happens with medicine. It happens with bread. It happens with housing. It happens with everything. That happens naturally. If you artificially kept the prices low, when you inflated the currency, you would run out of everything and people would die. That's what happens. So I just wanted to point out that the price inflation does not happen by consensus. It's not a thing that people agree to do. They don't look at what the Fed produced. They don't look at the dollars printed. They don't say, oh, it looks like we have a new quote stimulus package of $1 trillion. Therefore, I'm going to raise the price of bread. That's not what happens. The price of bread rises naturally because there's only so much bread. So you can print as many dollars as you want, but the natural consequence of that will be price inflation. And there's nothing you can do about it. This is not an agreement. The agreement comes at the point where you're agreeing that your fiat currency is worth something. The agreement doesn't come. It's not an arbitrary agreement that prices go up. It's a law of nature. Not a law of nature. It's a law of human action, right? This is how the market responds, and it must respond that way because you don't print Teslas. You only print dollars. That's why. So, that was it. I know that wasn't much of a exciting rant, and I know it was on money, but I wanted to clear that up. I love this video because I think it's a funny video. And I know that a lot of people in chat are mocking this girl, but you would be surprised. I think you would be surprised how many people watch that video, especially young people who are not being educated, and look at this and say, well, that makes sense. Why can't we do that? If we can arbitrarily declare that this blue bill is worth a different amount than this red bill, why can't we just declare prices? And I know that's scary to people who understand any kind of economics, but there's a lot of that out there. So